Hare Krishna devotees, welcome to, let me tell you, day 32 of our Bhakti Vaibhava seminar on Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4. We are in chapter 13. We're going to be beginning from verse 22, and it's all about King Vaina and who he was and how he came to be how he was. This 13th chapter is titled Description of the Descendants of Dhruva Maharaj. So let us chant our prayers. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarane Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadha Shivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Vanchkapacharubhyascha Kripas Sindhubhya Eva Cha, Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Right, okay. So let us just get into it. Description of the descendants of Dhruva Maharaj and the description of King Vaina. So we've already been through all the verses themselves, and we've started on the verses with the purports, and we're continuing in that way from verse 22 right now. Vidura also inquired, how is it that the great sages who are completely conversant with religious principles desired to curse King Vaina, who himself carried the rod of punishment, and thus awarded him the greatest punishment, Brahma Shapa, the curse of Brahmins, to die? I mean, in effect, that's what Brahma Shapa is. Yes, so right. Let's have a look at the short purport here. Thing is that, and this is the point that the sages raise, that the king is the punisher, usually. But here, the sages are punishing him. And on the surface it sounds like, they can't do that. It's against the basic principles of how things should be done. So, in other words, King Vaina, must have done something extremely serious. Otherwise, the sages who are, very conversant with the principles, very sattvic, and very, benevolent, if he hadn't done something of extreme seriousness, either they couldn't punish him, or at least they wouldn't punish him. But they did so in spite of their elevated state of mind. So this means the king is not independent of Brahminical culture, because above the king was the Brahmins and the control of the Brahmins. And if necessary, they could take some drastic action, even to the point of killing him. Although, being Brahmins, they wouldn't do it with weapons like bows and arrows, swords, guns, but with mantras, Brahma Shapa, the curse of Brahmins. Because the fact is that Brahmins are so powerful that simply by their cursing, the person would just immediately die. Right, okay, so now verse 23. It is the duty of all citizens in a state never to insult the king, even though he sometimes appears to have done something very sinful. Because of his prowess, the king is always more influential than all other ruling chiefs. Yes, so here we go. Again, another short purport, but very important, that the Vedic standard is the king represents the Lord. He's called Nara Narayan. Narayan in the form of Nara. Nara meaning human being. Yes, so indicating that the king means Narayan has appeared in human society. And the etiquette, of course, that a Brahmin or a king would never be insulted by the citizens, even if the king apparently really did something wrong. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, but in the case of Vena, it appears that he was cursed by the Nara Devatas, the Brahmins, Devata meaning gods, and the Nara, gods in human forms. Therefore, it must be concluded that his sinful activities were very grievous. 24. Vidura requested Maitreya, my dear Brahman, you are well conversant with all subjects, both past and future. Therefore, I wish to hear from you all the activities of King Vena. I am your faithful devotee, so please explain this. So, yes, again, purport from Srila Prabhupada. And we can see Vidura is accepting Maitreya as spiritual master. And Vidura is taking the position of disciple. Disciple inquires from the spiritual master. Spiritual master answers, at least provided the disciple is in the right mood, gentle, devoted, humble like that. And Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, by the mercy of the spiritual master, one is blessed with the mercy of the Lord. But the spiritual master is not inclined to disclose all sort of secrets and important things of the transcendental science unless the disciple is very submissive and devoted. So Srila Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, as stated in the Bhagavad Gita, the process of receiving knowledge from the spiritual master entails submission, inquiry, and service. 25. Sri Maitreya replied, my dear Vidura, once the great King Anga arranged to perform the great sacrifice known as Ashvamedha. All the expert Brahmins present knew how to invite the demigods, but in spite of their efforts, no demigods participated or appeared in that sacrifice. So this is now Maitreya responding or beginning his response, leading up to the whole situation with Vena. Yeah. So Vedic sacrifices are not just some ordinary thing. The demigods would always take part. The animals sacrificed would always get new life. But in Kali Yuga, there are no such Brahmins. So therefore all these types of sacrifices are forbidden. Ashvamedha, of course, means horse. Ashva means horse. Horse sacrifice. Cow sacrifice, Prabhupada says, is Gavalamba. Right. And not for eating purposes, but to give new life, to show the potency of the mantras. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, in this age, therefore, the only practical yajna is Sankirtan Yajna, or chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra 24 hours a day. Verse 26, the priests engaged in the sacrifice then informed King Anga, this is Maitreya explaining what happened, why no demigods. So they informed King Anga, O king, we are properly offering the clarified butter in the sacrifice, but despite all our efforts, the demigods do not accept it. There's no purport here, verse 27. O king, we know that the paraphernalia to perform the sacrifice is well collected by you with great faith and care, and is not polluted. Our chanting of the Vedic hymns is also not deficient in any way, for all the Brahmins and priests present here are expert and are executing the performances properly. So, it's a very enigmatic situation. So, qualified Brahmins, everybody's qualified, it seems, and everybody's doing it properly. So, it's not, the problem is not the Brahmin's problem. I mean, the chanting of the mantras has to be done in very, very precise ways. And these Brahmins, they can do it, and they are doing it. Nowadays, of course, the Brahmins can't do that. They're not well versed in Sanskrit, they're not pure in their habits, their activities. But if we simply chant Hare Krishna, one can attain the highest benefit of sacrificial performance. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, even if the Hare Krishna mantra is not chanted properly, it still has so much potency that the chanter gains the effect. Verse 28. Dear King, we do not find any reason that the demigod should feel insulted or neglected in any way. But still the demigods who are witnesses for the sacrifice do not accept their shares. We do not know why this is so. Yes, so Prabhupada explains if there is negligence on, any of the involved parts, here particularly Prabhupada refers to the priests, then the demigods will not accept their share. So similarly in devotional service, there are offences known as seva aparad. Those who are worshipping deities, particularly Radha and Krishna, must avoid such offences, which are listed in Nectar of Devotion, chapter 8. If we simply make a show of deity worship and don't care about seva aparad, then definitely the deities will not accept the offerings from such people who are sort of effectively non-devotees. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, devotees engaged in temple worship should not, therefore, manufacture their own methods, but should strictly follow the regulative principles of cleanliness, and then offerings will be accepted. Verse 29. Maitreya explained that King Anga, after hearing the statements of the priests, was greatly aggrieved. At that time he took permission from the priests to break his silence and inquired from all the priests who were present in the sacrificial arena. King Anga addressed the priestly order. My dear priests, kindly tell me what offense I've committed. Although invited, the demigods are neither taking part in the sacrifice nor accepting their shares. Verse 31, the head priests said, O king, in this life we do not find any sinful activity even within your mind. So you are not in the least offensive. So it's not your fault. But we can see that in your previous life, you performed sinful activities, due to which, in spite of your having all qualifications, means now, still because of that, in your previous life, you have no son. Because that was what he wanted. He wanted to have a son. So, yes, so Prabhupada gives a short purport. The purpose of marrying is to have a son, because a son can deliver the father and forefathers from hell. Therefore, Chanakya Pandit says, Putrahinam griham shunyam. Without a son, putra means son, hinam, without. Without a son, griham, married life, grihastha life, shunyam, it literally means zero, actually. So without a son, married life is simply abominable. So King Anga was very pious in this life, but because of sinful activity done previously to this life, couldn't get a son. So Prabhupada concludes that it is concluded, therefore, that if a person does not get a son, it is due to his past sinful life. So, right, on we go to verse 32. O King, we wish all good fortune for you. You have no son, but if you pray at once to the Supreme Lord and ask for a son, and if you execute the sacrifice for that purpose, the enjoyer of the sacrifice, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, will fulfill your desire. There's no purport there to verse 32. Verse 33. When Hari, the supreme enjoyer of all sacrifices, is invited to fulfill your desire for a son, all the demigods will come with him and take their shares in the sacrifice. So, okay, in the purport, Srila Prabhupada makes the point that sacrifices ultimately are meant to satisfy Lord Vishnu. He is the enjoyer of all sacrifices. So when he comes to a sacrificial arena, naturally all the demigods come following their master, and then their shares are offered. So Srila Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, the conclusion is that the sacrifices performed are meant for Lord Vishnu, not for the demigods. Verse 34, the performer of the sacrifices under karmakanda activities achieves the fulfillment of the desire for which he worships the Lord. Okay, so Prabhupada gives a purport here. In Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says he awards benedictions to people who worship as they desire. And he gives all living entities freedom to act as they like. But for devotees, he says they should not do that. They should not do anything other than surrender to him. Yes. So let me just read what the Prabhupada says in the purport. But to his devotee he says that instead of working in that way, karmakandya, it is better to surrender unto him, because then he'll take charge of the devotee. Yeah. Right, okay. So for the devotees, he says they shouldn't do like that, just worshipping for whatever they like. They should surrender to him. Then he will take charge of the devotee. That's the difference between the devotee and the fruitive actor. So the fruitive actor just enjoys just the fruits of his activities, but the devotee, under the guidance of the Lord, advances in devotional service to achieve the ultimate goal of life, going back to Godhead. So Prabhupada says a significant word here, the significant word in this verse is kaman, sense gratificatory desires. Right. So a devotee is free from those types of desires because he's anyabilashita shunyam. Yeah, his only aim is to satisfy the senses of the Lord. That's the difference between the karmi and the devotee. And the thing was that at the beginning of the purport, Prabhupada was talking about the materialist, the karmi worshippers, materialistic, who just want something material. So devotees should not be like that at all. Verse 35, thus, for the sake of a son for King Anga, they decided to offer oblations to Lord Vishnu, who is situated in the hearts of all living entities. So it appears that initially, at least it appears, the Ashwamedha sacrifice was not to get a son for King Anga. But now it's sort of been adopted for the sake of getting a son for King Anga. So Prabhupada makes the point, which has been made on many occasions actually in the Bhagavatam. These sacrifices, animal sacrifices, in this case it's a horse, it's not to kill them, but to give the animal a new life, to see if the mantras are working in the sacrifice or not. And to some degree, there's a parallel. Sometimes in a medical laboratory, small animals are killed to investigate the therapeutic effects of whatever, some medicine or chemicals. In those cases, the animals are not revived, but in the yajna they are, by the potency of the mantras. So, the word Shipi Vishtaya is important. Shipi means the flames of sacrifice. Yeah, Shipi Vishtaya. Shipi Vishtaya. In the sacrificial fire, if the oblations are offered into the flames, then Lord Vishnu is there in the form of the flames. Therefore, Lord Vishnu is known as, Lord Vishnu is known as Shipi Vishta. He lives in the flames. Not he lives, but he's there in the form of the flames. Verse 36, as soon as the oblation was offered in the fire, a person appeared from the fire altar wearing a golden garland and a white dress. He was carrying a golden pot filled with rice boiled in milk. Okay, interesting. Rice boiled in milk. Yeah, payasam. Payasam. Payasam is generally more like sweet rice, actually. 37. The king was very liberal, and after taking permission from the priests, he took the preparation in his joined palms, and after smelling it, he offered a portion to his wife. Right, okay, let's have a look at the purport. It's all getting pretty serious, actually. Prabhupada says the word udaradi is significant. Udaradi, well, means liberally minded. So really, his wife, Sunita, was not fit to accept this benediction. But the thing is, the king was so liberal, King Anga, he offered it to her. Boiled rice in milk prasadam from the Yajna Purusha, the personality of the Yajna. So, ultimately everything's designed by the Lord, but this situation was not actually favorable for the king. As we'll see just shortly, actually. So, he was Anga. Actually, Anga's a great devotee. He's a very great devotee. But the Lord wanted to increase his detachment. So therefore the Lord gave him a very cruel son, so the king would leave home. The Lord Vishnu fulfills the desires of the Karamis as they want, but he fulfills the desires of the devotees differently, so that the devotee gradually comes to him. Bhagavad Gita, chapter 10, verse 10, confirms this. Dadami buddhi yogam tam yena mam upiyanti te. I give them the understanding by which they can come to me. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, the Lord gives the devotee the opportunity to make progress further and further, so that he may come back home, back to Godhead. So, verse 38, although the queen had no son, after eating that food, which had the power to produce a male child, she became pregnant by her husband, and in due course of time she gave birth to a son. And of course, I'm sure, at that time, right at that moment, when they say, oh, it's a son, everyone was like, Hari Bol, how wonderful, we're so happy. So anyway, there's a short purport here. Prabhupada says, I'll just read the whole purport. Among the 10 kinds of purificatory processes, one is Pumsavanam. Pumsavanam, yeah, that's correct. In which the wife is offered some prasad, or remnants of foodstuff offered to Lord Vishnu, so that after sexual intercourse with her husband, she may conceive a child. All right, so verse 39. Now the plot thickens. I mean, this is really... Okay. So 39. That boy was born partially in the dynasty of irreligion. His grandfather was death personified. In other words, the father of his mother. And the boy grew up as his follower, death personified. So he became a greatly irreligious person. So let's look at the purport. Sunita is the daughter of death personified. And, generally speaking, the daughter gets the qualities of the father, the son gets the qualities of the mother. So her, Sunita, the wife, was the daughter of death personified. She got the qualifications of death personified, the qualities. Then Vena, the son who just was born, it's Vena, The son gets the qualities of the mother here, and the mother is Sunita. She has the qualities of her father, who's death personified. So the son, Vena, got the qualities of death personified. Yes, so Prabhupada says, so Anga's child became a follower of his maternal grandfather, means death personified. Smriti Shastra confirms this also. Well, Smriti Shastra says child generally follows the principles of the maternal uncle's house. Narana Matula Karama, Prabhupada quotes, yes, in this first paragraph, not actually from the verse itself, but it's something Vedic. Narana Matula Karama means a child generally follows the qualities of the maternal family, the mother's family. If the maternal family, the mother's family, is corrupt or sinful, the child, even if born of a good father, which was the case here, Anga was a very good father, he becomes a victim of the maternal family. Therefore, in Vedic civilization, before marriage happens, account is taken of the boys' and girls' families. Prabhupada says, if according to astrological calculation the combination is perfect, then marriage takes place. Sometimes, however, there's a mistake, and family life becomes frustrating. This is the case here. He should never have accepted Sunita as his wife. I don't think we really know how it happened. But Prabhupada comments in the second paragraph of the purport, it seems Anga did not get a good wife in Sunita, as she was the daughter of death personified. It sounds like the astrologers did not do their job properly. Yeah. Maybe. But anyway, in this case, Anga is a great devotee. Prabhupada says here, sometimes the Lord arranges an unfortunate wife for his devotee. So he gradually becomes detached and then makes progress in devotional service. And of course, we all know this happened to Srila Prabhupada. So it seems this was the case with Anga, Prabhupada says. He was a good devotee, but got a bad wife, and then a bad son, like Vena. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, but the result was that he got complete freedom from the entanglement of family life, and went home back to Godhead. Now just listen to these verses. Sure. It's amazing. Truly amazing. Verse 40. After fixing his bow and arrow, the cruel boy, Vena, the son of this bad wife, the daughter of death personified, the cruel boy used to go to the forest and unnecessarily kill innocent deer. And as soon as he came, all the people would cry, here comes cruel Vena, here comes cruel Vena. So Prabhupada makes the point, though, in the purport here. Kshatriyas would hunt to learn the killing art, not for eating, etc. Sometimes the Kshatriyas had to cut off the head of a culprit, like some criminal. So they were allowed to hunt to practice for those things. So that now in this case, he's a child. So it's not that he's doing this for being trained up as a Kshatriya to maintain law and order. So Prabhupada says, as the verse says, Vena would frighten everyone. So from the beginning of his life, he was fearful to citizens. 41. The boy was so cruel that while playing with young boys of his age, he would kill them very mercilessly, as if they were animals meant for slaughter. Isn't that just amazing? Isn't that incredible? I mean, this Vaibhava, he was just a most unbelievably horrible person. Verse 42, after seeing the cruel and merciless behavior of his son, Vaibhava, King Anga punished him in different ways to reform him, but was unable to bring him to the path of gentleness. He thus became greatly aggrieved. So he tried to train him, punish him, to sort him out so he understands what to do and what not to do. But the boy would not listen. He just carried on, killing, even killing like his friends. 43. The king thought to himself, persons who have no son are certainly fortunate. They must have worshipped the Lord in their previous lives so that they would not have to suffer the unbearable unhappiness caused by a bad son. There's just a short purport here. I'll just read the whole thing. It is said that a married couple must have a son, otherwise their family life is void. But a son born without good qualities is as good as a blind eye. A blind eye has no use for seeing, but it's simply unbearably painful. The king therefore thought himself very unfortunate to have such a bad son. Verse 44, and this is Anga again. A sinful son causes a person's reputation to vanish. His irreligious activities at home cause irreligion and quarrel among everyone, and this creates only endless anxiety. 45. Who, if he's considerate and intelligent, would desire such a worthless son? Such a son is nothing but a bond of illusion for the living entity, and he makes one's home miserable. Verse 46. Then the king thought, a bad son is better than a good son, because a good son creates an attachment for home, whereas a bad son does not. A bad son creates a hellish home from which an intelligent man naturally becomes very easily detached. Okay, let's have a look at the purport by Srila Prabhupada. So now the king is thinking in terms of attachment and detachment from home. Prahlad says a material home, like materialistic home, is like a blind well. If somehow you fall into a blind well which is covered by grass, nobody knows it's there, then it's very hard to get out, and you may just not get out. So Prahlad says we must get out of the blind well as soon as we can and go to the forest to take shelter of the Lord. According to Vedic civilization, giving up home by vanaprasthas and sannyasis is compulsory. But now, of course, today, people are too attached. They stay till death. So therefore, ultimately, Anga thought his son was a positive influence, so he considered him a friend, helping him become detached. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, ultimately one has to learn how to detach oneself from attachment to material life. Therefore, if a bad son, by his bad behavior, helps a householder to go away from home, it is a boon, a blessing. 47. Thinking like that, King Anga could not sleep at night. He became completely indifferent to household life. Once, therefore, in the dead of night, he got up from bed and left Vaina's mother, his wife, who was sleeping deeply. He gave up all attraction for his greatly opulent kingdom, and, unseen by anyone, he very silently gave up his home and opulence and proceeded towards the forest. So Prabhupada begins the purport by saying, in this verse the word Mahodayodayat indicates that by the blessings of a great soul, one becomes materially opulent. But when one gives up attachment to material wealth, that should be considered an even greater blessing from the great souls. So it was not easy for Anga to give up his kingdom and faithful wife, but it was a blessing from the Lord that he could give up that attachment and go to the forest unseen. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, there are many instances of great souls leaving home in this way in the dead of night, giving up attachment for home, wife, and money. And you know what? Basically, Srila Prabhupada did it himself. Oh yes. Verse 48. When it was understood that the king had indifferently left home, all the citizens, priests, ministers, friends, and people in general were greatly aggrieved. They began to search for him all over the world, just as a less experienced mystic searches out the supersoul within himself. Prabhupada says the example of searching for the supersoul in the heart by the less intelligent mystics is very instructive. The absolute truth is in 3 phases. The kuyogis, the word is in the last line of the verse. The kuyogis, less intelligent mystics, by mental speculation, they can reach the impersonal Brahman, but they can't find the supersoul in everyone's heart. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, when the king left, it was certain that he was staying somewhere else. But because the citizens did not know how to find him, they were frustrated, like the less intelligent mystics. Verse 49, which is the end of the chapter, devotees. When the citizens could not find any trace of the king, after searching for him everywhere, they were very disappointed, and they returned to the city, where all the great sages of the country assembled because of the king's absence. With tears in their eyes, the citizens offered respectful obeisances and informed the sages in full detail that they were unable to find the king anywhere. So we will carry on tomorrow with chapter 14, which is titled The Story of King Vaina. Oh, there's going to be more about Vaina. Oh yes, sure, pretty heavy. Hare Krishna.